I'm not saying I believe her, but I can't ignore how you've been acting lately. Graham stood in our bedroom doorway with his arms folded across his chest. His jaw was tight. The same man who used to trace the freckles on my shoulders now looked at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. I didn't respond right away. My hands rested on the edge of our neatly made bed, white sheets tucked in perfectly. Not because I was afraid, because I was stunned. She thinks you're manipulative, he said again, quieter this time. Like saying it softer would make it reasonable. And honestly, Eloan, I'm starting to see what she means. That was the moment everything shifted. My husband had just repeated his mother's words like they were facts. Like her opinion carried more weight than our entire marriage. I looked at him and saw it clearly. Her fingerprints were all over his doubt. On his words. On the way his eyes wouldn't meet mine. Like he was already preparing to choose her side. She'd turned my husband against me. And he'd let her do it without a fight. My name is Eloan Reed. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a graphic designer from home. I create visual branding, editorial layouts, and marketing materials for small businesses. I'm good at what I do because I understand balance. I understand how to keep things from falling apart. I grew up in Vermont with a mother who worked as a school librarian. She taught me to make things last, to be practical, to value quiet stability. My father died when I was 16, which probably explains why I avoid conflict. Why I read people's body language like a second language. Why I notice everything. I noticed Graham's mother, Lorraine, from the very beginning. She had this cold charm that came wrapped in pearl earrings and polite smiles. At our engagement dinner, she told me I was prettier than she expected. She gave me her grandmother's cookbook with recipes already marked up in red ink with corrections. I thought she just needed time to adjust to me. I didn't realize she'd already decided I wasn't good enough, and that she'd spend the next 3 years trying to prove it. The first Rayal warning came about 6 months after the wedding. Lorraine insisted on hosting Sunday dinner at her house. I spent all afternoon making a lemon tart from scratch, something my mother used to make. Lorraine didn't touch it. She looked at it on the table and said, I don't blame Eloan for being tired. Working women don't always have time to learn proper baking technique. Graham laughed awkwardly. Mom's just old-fashioned. Don't take it personally. But I watched Lorraine's face. The corners of her mouth turned up just slightly. She wasn't being old-fashioned. She was testing me, seeing if I'd react, seeing if she could chip away at me in front of Graham without consequence. That moment didn't start a fight. She didn't want to fight. She wanted something slower. Erosion. Little cracks in the foundation of our marriage that would grow over time until everything collapsed. And I was already a step behind. Graham started keeping things from me. Small things at first. He'd mentioned having lunch with his mother 3 days after it happened. He'd take her advice about our finances without telling me. He'd repeat her suggestions like they were his own ideas. Then one night, I picked up his phone to check the time. A text notification lit up the screen. Lorraine, don't let her guilt you. Remember who you were before her. Graham, I know. I'm trying. I set the phone down carefully. My hands were shaking. That message wasn't just criticism. It was strategy. She was actively working to separate him from me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Graham and realized something important. She wanted me to confront him, to get emotional, to prove her point that I was difficult. So I didn't. I stayed quiet, and I started watching more carefully. I began studying Lorraine like she was a design problem I needed to solve. I noticed patterns. The way she acted in front of other people was different from when we were alone. In public, she was sweet and concerned. In private, she was cold and critical. She'd twist things I said. I'd tell Graham I was tired from a long work week, and suddenly Lorraine was telling him I'd complained about never having time for family. I'd suggest we stay home one Sunday, and she'd tell Graham I was trying to isolate him. Every time it happened, I'd ask Graham calmly, "Did your mom really say I did that on purpose?" He'd look confused. No, she just mentioned it. But that was the problem. She wasn't lying directly. She was reframing reality, taking true things and bending them just enough to make me look bad. And Graham was starting to believe her version of events instead of mine. Lorraine started showing up at our house unannounced. The first time, I was working on a client project in my home office. I heard the front door open and found her in our kitchen. "Oh, Eloan, I didn't know you'd be home," she said, even though my car was in the driveway. "I brought some soup. Graham gave me a spare key months ago." I hadn't known about the spare key. Graham had never mentioned it. And suddenly I understood that there were conversations happening between them that I wasn't part of. I watched Lorraine open our refrigerator and start rearranging things, moving my containers around, organizing shelves I'd already organized. "You really don't keep much fresh produce," she said. "But that's okay. You've always been more career-focused than domestic." I didn't argue. I just walked to the cabinet, took the spare key from her purse when she wasn't looking, and kept it. She didn't notice. She thought I was too passive to do anything about her behavior. She had no idea I was building a case. The next week, Graham said he wanted to take some space. Not move out, just reevaluate our routines. Figure out why things felt off between us. "Is this about your mother?" I asked. He didn't deny it. "She says you don't value family, that you always put your work first." I realized then that Lorraine wasn't just criticizing me. She was redefining who I was in Graham's mind, slowly replacing the woman he married with the character she'd created. I nodded and said nothing. Let them think I was giving up. Let them believe they were winning, because they'd forgotten something important. I was a designer. I knew how to deconstruct things and rebuild them better. And I was already planning exactly how to do that with this situation. I did something unexpected. I invited Lorraine to dinner at our house. Just the three of us. Graham was surprised. "Are you sure? I thought things were tense." "That's exactly why we should talk," I said, smiling. "Clear the air." I spent the whole day cooking. 3 different dishes. I bought her favorite wine. I set the table with our nice dishes and ironed the tablecloth. Every detail was perfect. Halfway through dinner, Lorraine asked if Graham and I were planning to have children soon. I said gently, "Not while there's still tension between the people who would help raise them." She blinked. Graham shifted in his chair. Then I added, "We wouldn't want to bring a child into anything emotionally unstable." The color drained from Lorraine's face. Graham cleared his throat, and I smiled pleasantly, like I'd just commented on the weather. The rest of dinner was very quiet. After that dinner, Lorraine stopped visiting in person, but she started texting me more. Sweet messages, friendly questions, offers to help. "Hey, sweetie, hope work isn't too stressful. Let me know if you need anything." I recognized the tactic immediately. She was building a paper trail, evidence that she'd been kind and I'd been distant. So if things came to a head, she could show Graham all these nice messages I'd barely responded to. I kept my replies short and polite. "Thanks, we're good here." No emojis, no warmth, just acknowledgement. She wanted to control the narrative, but I wasn't going to give her the material she needed. Every text from her went into a folder I'd created on my phone. Dated. Saved. Just in case. Graham suggested we try couples therapy. I agreed immediately, but with one condition. Let's focus on just us for the first few sessions. No talking about family stuff yet. He seemed relieved. Maybe he thought therapy would prove I was the problem. During our second session, I brought up communication patterns, how outside influences had created distance between us. I never mentioned Lorraine by name, just talked about how third-party opinions had affected our relationship. The therapist, Dr. Chen, asked Graham how often he talked to his mother. "Every day," he said, like it was completely normal. Dr. Chen tilted her head slightly. "And does she often weigh in on your marriage decisions?" Graham hesitated. You could see him thinking, realizing, "I guess so." "Yeah." The therapist made a note. I didn't say anything. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. I started keeping detailed records. A private folder on my laptop where I documented everything. Dates when Lorraine showed up uninvited. Screenshots of her texts. Notes about things she'd said that Graham later repeated as his own thoughts. Each piece of evidence was small on its own, easy to dismiss, but together they formed a clear pattern. A timeline of manipulation. I organized it all carefully, chronologically, with context but no emotion. Just facts. because I knew that eventually someone would need to see this. And when they did, I wanted it to be undeniable. We were at a family brunch at Lorraine's house. Her cousin was visiting and started talking about estate planning, updating wills, making sure everything was in order. Lorraine said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, I've made sure my will protects real family first, in case anyone turns out to be temporary." She glanced at me when she said temporary. The message was clear. Everyone at the table got quiet. Graham looked uncomfortable. I kept eating my toast like nothing had happened. She wanted me to react, to get upset, to cause a scene she could later use as proof that I was unstable. Instead, I asked her calmly to pass the jam. And I smiled. Not a fake smile, but a genuinely peaceful one. Like her words meant nothing to me. She faltered, just for a second, because she'd expected anger and peaceful confidence through her off balance. A few weeks later, Graham started talking about our finances, suggesting we split bills differently, keep things cleaner financially. We'd always shared expenses based on income. I'd paid more when he was starting his business. He'd planned to pay more now that he was profitable. That had been our agreement. But apparently, Lorraine had told him it was dangerous to be financially tied to a spouse who might use money as control. When I found out, I didn't argue. I just said, sure, we can split things evenly. What Graham didn't know was that I'd been quietly building my own financial independence for months. Separate savings account, individual investments. I'd learned a long time ago to always have my own safety net. He thought he was protecting himself. He had no idea he was just making my exit easier if it came to that. For my birthday, Lorraine sent me a card, hand-addressed. Inside was a $50 gift card to a chain restaurant and a note that said, "You should treat yourself sometime. You deserve something nice, even when things are tough." The implication was obvious. My life was tough. My marriage was struggling. And she was being kind despite how difficult I made things. I didn't use the gift card. Instead, I bought a book about emotional manipulation and gaslighting. I left it on our coffee table where anyone could see it. The next time Lorraine visited, her eyes landed on that book. She stared at it for a long moment. I didn't explain, didn't acknowledge it, just let her wonder if I was onto her. Graham's cousin was getting married. At the rehearsal dinner, Lorraine was center stage, sharing marriage advice, laughing with relatives, playing the role of wise matriarch. She caught my eye across the room and raised her wine glass. A small toast, a small victory in her mind. I stood up and walked over to the bride. I handed her a small white envelope I'd prepared. Inside was a printed summary. Not angry, not emotional, just a factual outline of Lorraine's behavior patterns. Examples of how she inserted herself into family decisions. How she undermined people. All dated, all documented. "I thought you should see this," I said quietly to the bride, "before she starts doing the same thing to you." The bride's smile dropped as she opened the envelope. Across the room, Lorraine noticed our conversation, and for the first time, she looked uncertain. Within a week, I got a text from the bride. "You were right. She's already trying to take over my wedding planning." Apparently, Lorraine had called the florist and tried to change the flowers. She'd criticized the menu to the caterer. She told the bride's mother how things should be done properly. But this time, she wasn't dealing with someone who didn't see it coming. The bride shut her down immediately, set firm boundaries, told her to back off. Lorraine was confused. This had always worked before. She'd always been able to control things through persistence and guilt. Now her tactics were failing, and she didn't understand why, because she didn't know that people were finally comparing notes, that her carefully maintained image had cracks in it now. And I'd caused those cracks without saying a single harsh word. Our 5th wedding anniversary came and went. Graham forgot. No dinner reservation, no card, no acknowledgement. He said work had been overwhelming, that he'd lost track of time. But Lorraine didn't forget. She sent Graham a bottle of expensive bourbon with a handwritten note attached. 5 years is impressive, considering the stress you've been under. He read the note out loud without realizing what it implied. That our marriage was stressful. That he was enduring something difficult. That 5 years was an achievement because being married to me was hard. I didn't point it out. I just took a photo of the note for my records, added it to my documentation folder with a simple label. Anniversary manipulation. The evidence was piling up. At a charity fundraiser, I was seated next to a woman named Patricia. Her husband worked at the same firm as Graham. We made polite conversation about nothing important. Then Patricia leaned closer and lowered her voice. Can I ask you something? Off the record. Sure, I said. Has Lorraine always been like that? I blinked. Like what? Patricia glanced around to make sure no one was listening. The way she talks about you at firm events. I've overheard her multiple times. It's not subtle, Aloan. And it's not kind. My heart started pounding. What does she say? That you're difficult. That Graham struggles with you. That you're not what she hoped for her son. Patricia looked genuinely concerned. I just thought you should know. You're not imagining things. I thanked her. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Lorraine had been running a campaign against me. Not just with Graham, but with everyone in our social circle. And now, finally, people were starting to notice. That night, Graham came home late. He looked exhausted. I made him tea and handed him the cup. Patricia mentioned something tonight, he said quietly. About my mom. About things she's been saying about you. I sat down next to him. Didn't say anything. Just let the silence hang there. I don't know what to believe anymore, he admitted. Finally, after all this time, he was starting to question things. I asked him gently, do you want to know what I've noticed? Or do you want to keep pretending this is all about me? He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in months. Tell me, he said. So I did. Lorraine called a family brunch for her birthday. I agreed to go. Graham was surprised, but I insisted. We should be there. Lorraine wore a navy silk dress and diamond earrings. She looked triumphant, like she'd already won whatever game she thought we were playing. But when we arrived, her cousin took one look at me and said loudly, Aloan, I'm glad you came. I've been hearing a lot lately. Lorraine's face changed. Just slightly. Enough that I noticed. Patricia had been talking. Quietly. Carefully. To the right people. Lorraine's carefully maintained image was starting to crack. Her reputation as the perfect mother-in-law was being questioned. And I hadn't done anything except tell the truth to one person who'd asked. In our next therapy session, Dr. Chin asked Graham about his mother's intentions again. She means well, Graham said, but his voice was uncertain now, less confident. Dr. Chin leaned forward. What if someone's good intentions cause harm to your partner? At what point do intentions stop mattering? Graham didn't answer right away. I watched him process the question, watched him start to understand. Sometimes the cleanest form of justice is just helping someone see clearly. Not manipulating them, just removing the fog, so they can see what was there all along. I left a red envelope on Graham's desk in his home office. Inside was a printed copy of the text message his mother had sent me months ago. The one about being temporary. The one I'd screenshot and saved. No note. No explanation. Just the evidence. I was in the hallway when he opened it. I didn't go in. Just kept folding laundry like it was any other evening. Later that night, Graham came to bed and said quietly, I don't know who she's trying to protect anymore. Me or herself. I didn't answer, because he was finally starting to see it. And nothing I could say would be more powerful than him reaching that conclusion on his own. On a Thursday afternoon, I got a phone call from the bride. Graham's cousin. She was crying. Lorraine showed up at my final dress fitting, she said. She tried to fire my florist. In front of everyone. She said the centerpieces were embarrassing, and that I clearly didn't know how to plan a proper wedding. What did you do? I asked. I lost it, she admitted. I told her to leave. My mom told her not to come to the rehearsal dinner. My dad sent her an email saying she's not welcome if she can't respect boundaries. By the next day, everyone in the family knew. Lorraine had pushed too far. And this time, she'd done it in front of witnesses who weren't afraid to talk about it. She forwarded the email to Graham with one line. This is your wife's doing. Graham showed me the message. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. We both knew it wasn't my doing. It was Lorraine's. Her behavior had finally caught up with her. Graham took 3 days off work. He said he needed time to think, to process everything that had happened. When he came back, I was on our balcony watering the herbs I'd planted. Basil, thyme, rosemary. The ones Lorraine had once said made our kitchen smell too earthy. Graham sat down next to me. I owe you an apology, but I know it's not enough. I kept watering the plants. Okay. He talked for a long time about how his mother had raised him to always protect her, to put her feelings first, about how he'd confused guilt with love, about all the moments he'd seen her manipulation but chosen to ignore it. What do you want from me now? He finally asked. I looked at him. Nothing. I just want you to see clearly. That's all I've ever wanted. He nodded slowly. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to the man I'd married instead of the person his mother had tried to turn him into. A week later, there was a knock on our door. I opened it and found Lorraine standing there. She looked smaller somehow. No makeup, no jewelry, her hair pulled back in a simple style. She looked tired and old. I didn't think it would end like this, she said. I stood in the doorway. Calm, steady. What did you think would happen? I was trying to protect him, she said. Her voice cracked. I only wanted to protect my son. I looked at her for a long moment. You didn't protect him, Lorraine. You tried to control him. There's a difference. Eloan, please. I lost my son because of this. No, I said quietly. You lost your son because you couldn't let him grow up. Because you saw his wife as competition instead of family. Because you chose manipulation over honesty. She started crying. Real tears this time. I felt something then. Not quite pity. Not quite satisfaction. Just a deep, quiet peace. The kind that comes from knowing you handled something the right way. That you didn't become cruel. That you stayed true to yourself even when someone tried to break you. I hope you figure out what you really wanted, I said. But it won't be at my expense anymore. Then I stepped back and closed the door. Not slamming it. Just closing it firmly. Locking it. I walked back to the balcony where Graham was sitting. He looked at me with a question in his eyes. She came, I said simply. What did you tell her? The truth. He nodded. And we sat there together in the evening light, watering herbs and planning a future that finally belonged to just us.